Alright, another video today. So this is going to cover Hunter x Hunter Volume 2. This is where my Volume 2 would be if I had one. I actually do not own that volume physically, unfortunately, which is weird because I have 3 and 4. Anyways, so not too much to say in this one compared to Volume 1. I mean, it's the first volume, of course I'm going to say a lot. Volume 2 is just a continuation of it. Actually, it has one of my least favorite parts, actually, of this series, funny enough. But it's still very solid. It's a fun entry, and it actually does some important stuff. So, Volume 2 continues right where Volume 1 left off, with Hisoka challenging our main cast. Or at least he kind of tries to challenge them, but he actually is turned away because of a mysterious message he has on receiver that's telling him, get back to work, basically. But he's still amazed by Gon's prowess, and he tells him that he's passed in a very cryptic way. Now, something I wanted to bring up about Hisoka, and I actually had brought this up to one of my friends, is that in the manga, this is not a thing that's can really be done outside of manga. But in the manga, Hisoka will end his speech bubbles with a symbol of one of the suits of cards. Heart, spade, clubs, and diamond, right? And when I first read it, I thought that there was something to that, and I started to really analyze early on, middle, and late. So throughout all of Hunter x Hunter, I was trying to see what could that symbolize. Maybe it's like a tone that he says those words in, and sure enough, I believe I did crack the code. So this is it. So hearts. If he ends a sentence with a heart, that means love, and that's pretty self-explanatory. He's very passionate about what he's saying. If it's a club, he's kind of musing. If it's a diamond, sort of like objectivity, matter of fact, judging, very kind of neutral. And then if it's spades, it's a kind of a reluctant acceptance. So I compared a scene from Volume 2 and compared a scene of Volume 30. It's consistent. Something else that could be possible is maybe because he wears different suit symbols for cards, and I wonder if that has anything to do with how he is in the arc. That I don't know. That's something I'm conscious of, and I'm going to kind of look at as this series goes on. So, yeah, there's that. So, it's great to see him this early on already so powerful. I mean, he's going slitting people's throats with cards. I mean, this is a pretty violent series, actually. But there's this moment, I actually screenshotted it. And again, I'm sorry, like, I would love to have the panels come up here, but because I'm kind of pumping these out daily, I'm not really putting much effort into editing. But Gon basically talks about how it was weird, but it was also exciting that he was facing a certain death, especially against this homicidal maniac. It's just kind of like a nice moment because it really does a good job setting up this tension between Gon and Hisoka that is prevalent throughout a majority of the series. And it touches on something that we really like as viewers or readers of Hisoka, is that he can do these heinous things, but there's just something so compelling about him. Like he's scary, right? But you can't look away, basically, and that's definitely true. And even I keep forgetting his name, Stanats or something, the guy with the mustache. Even he comments on that too, of just like that. Hisoka is an anomaly because he's definitely just as powerful, if not more so, than the examiners, and yet he hasn't passed. And it's more like he does this for the thrill of the game, in a sense, and ultimately that is a hunt, right? He's hunting for that desire, and so while he is an anomaly, he's actually in a way like an embodiment of what the hunters represent. I just think that's like a great moment. All that to say that unfortunately we don't get too much Hisoka in this volume. If I remember correctly, volume 3 definitely We'll have a lot more of him, and another significant character for him, I know for sure, shows up in Volume 3. Great character, but that'll be in tomorrow's video. So, anyways, so following this, we get probably my least favorite part, maybe in the whole series, but it's the test with Machi and I forgot the so it's a boy and a girl. I forgot the boy's name. He's this huge man. Did I say Machi? Oh my gosh, Menchi. Machi is one of the fan entry that comes later. Menchi is her name, and it's a cook off basically. Now, if you've only seen the anime, this is actually different in the anime, I believe. In the anime, it only has the pork cooking section. In the manga, it's so the big fat guy challenges them to make pork by capturing these wild boars, which Gon does very effortlessly. But he kind of lets the secret slip, and everyone ends up doing it basically. So then there's another test, and that's Menchi's test, and she says, "Oh, there's a far off country called Japan. Japan exists in this world." And she's like, "I want sushi." And the thing is, no one in Hunter x Hunter knows what sushi is except for this one guy who is from Japan. And he kind of lets it slip a little bit, but even then, it's like everyone's like, "Okay, it's fish and rice," and everyone kind of messes it up. And even this guy, I can't remember his name, but he reminds me a lot of Lord Baldy Bald from Bubble 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 Bubble. Well, he makes it seemingly perfectly, but then she tries it, throws it away, and she's like, "Don't you know it takes 10 years at least to become a sushi expert? Like, why even bother?" And so eventually she's like, "Oh, I've lost my appetite. No one passes. Everyone fails." And which sucks. I mean, that completely sucks. But it actually has a narrative purpose because this causes the chairman of the Hunter uh, organization, Isaac Netero, to appear, and Netero comes off as sort of a goofy, almost like Yoda type character here. Little do you know that Isaac Netero is actually an extremely significant and layered character. He's a major force during the Chimera invasion, and he's one of my top favorite characters in the whole series. So this is a nice moment, ultimately, because it's an excuse for him to enter, and he kind of scolds Menchi, like, "What are you doing? Like, this isn't fair. You let your emotions get the best of you, essentially." And he actually says, "Guess what? You're going to be part of this exam now, also." And so they do this other thing, like they catch eggs in a ravine. It's not that exciting. But what is exciting is Netero's like, "Well, while I'm here," he comes in this big Zeppelin, and he's like, "Well, now that I'm here, I'll give you guys a ride to the next challenge." And this part on the Zeppelin is actually very interesting for a couple reasons. So once again, we have Talpa scheming, with Talpa saying he's kind of trying to plant these seeds in our main characters' heads of, "Oh, this could be a part of the exam, don't doze off," because Kurapika and Leorio want to just go to sleep. He's like, "Oh, don't doze off. This might be a secret part of the exam." Meanwhile, Killua and Gon have this kind of good one-to-one, heart-to-heart moment where Killua lets it slip basically to Gon that he comes from a family of mass murderers and assassins. And Gon kind of chuckles, but Killua's actually telling the truth. And he basically says that they wanted him to follow in that path, and he said no. And the reason why he wants to be a hunter is because he wants to murder his whole family and collect their bounties. And they didn't like that he had his own kind of free will. So what did he do? He stabbed his family members multiple times and left. And he says, "Oh, they're probably still sore about that." So it's like a weirdly dark moment, almost played off as comedy. But this actually is a very significant moment because it's our first peek into how twisted and dark the Zoldyck family is, which I believe at this point we don't know that that's their name of the family, but that is what it is. And it's great. It's a great way to introduce that, where it almost feels like a gag, but it's so dark, and it actually leads into something else that happens kind of shortly after that I'll get to. So after this, Netero meets Gon and Killua, and Netero's actually like, "Hey, let's play a game, just the three of us. If you can take this ball from me, you'll instantly get your hunter license." So they say, "Oh yeah, of course." So Killua immediately does this sort of duplication art that blows Gon away. And it actually impresses Netero because Netero recognizes it as a high level assassination skill. Which again, like that, plays into Killua's character, you know? And so Gon and Killua keep trying to get this ball away from Netero, and they can't. And Killua decides to stop and kind of conserve his energy while Gon decides to keep going. But Killua was like, it's impossible because this entire time he has not even used his like left leg or whatever. Netero's like, okay, like kudos for pointing that out. And Gon's like, oh, I don't care about getting the ball. I just want him to be like get desperate enough to use his limbs. So Gon keeps challenging Netero head first, literally head first, even though it's kind of a futile act. But he ends up actually getting Netero to use an extra one of his limbs, which even impresses Netero. Meanwhile, Killua walks off, accidentally bumps into these guys, and they're kind of like, hey, watch your road. What does Killua do? He freaking dices them up. He just murders them in cold blood. Their blood and body parts splatter everywhere as Killua just coldly walks by, and he basically says, oh yeah, good thing I didn't stay there with Netero because I'd probably want to kill him in order to just get that ball. So it's like, wow, okay, this character is actually really dark. Like, he says that he's from a family of assassins and mass murderers, and here he murdered these two guys totally in cold blood, and in a way kind of threatened the chairman of the Hunter organization. So yeah, I mean, it's really dark. Then we have a moment of lightness where Kurapika and Leorio doze off, and Tompa's just like, oh, my scheme didn't work. But it's okay, Tompa, you have plenty more schemes in this arc, and actually in this volume, because then they are dropped off at Trick Tower, which unfortunately this one kind of ends prematurely during Trick Tower, but essentially it's like this tower that's full of all these kind of traps, and our main quartet are forced to work with Tompa because they're in this section where they have these bracelets where they basically all have to agree on something. And so, of course, Tompa is not really being cooperative and kind of playing dumb. And then turns out that this tower is full of convicts who are doing this because the hunters are telling them that the longer you the more you waste these examinees' times than, not examinees, contestants, I guess. The longer you waste your times, the more reduction your prison sentence gets. And so, basically, it's like three strikes, you're out for this arena, fight to the death. And Tompa, of course, is like, oh, I'll go first. Immediately surrenders. So, boom. Okay, two more, and then they lose. And Leorio gets so angry at Tompa. This is when Tompa finally says, like, I have no intention of being a hunter. I just do this for the thrill. I love just seeing people fail. And it's just such, like, weirdly dark moments. But again, it's like, hold on. It's just like, I don't know, it kind of adds something to Tompa's character. I think he's actually very underrated. I think he represents some kind of interesting, weird moral skew in this world. Like, some people are just, like, freaks. Some people just want others to fail, But ultimately, Tompa himself is a failure, so how much of it is just projection, right? If you fail, like, 35 times, if you've been trying since you were a kid, like, of course you'd be demoralized, right? And it also, like, it's just good folly for our characters because now it's like they have to try even harder, right? Because these people actually want to be a hunter, all for very different reasons. I want to live up to my father. I want to kill my family. I want revenge. I want money. Like, very drastically different outcomes, different dreams. By the way, I just wanted to say also, like, the concept of a hunter is kind of weird and loosey goosey in this series. Because actually, something that's brought up during the cooking part is there's a lot of kind of prejudice with the contestants where they're like, why do we have to cook? Like, that's not what hunters do. And if you're thinking about, like our conventional use of the term hunter, it's like, what are you talking about? Hunters cook all the time. But in Hunter x Hunter, hunter is more like you're kind of in a way, a jack of all trades. Like, you are someone that fights, you're someone that explores, that invents. You're basically just like an ubermensch. Basically, you can do anything essentially, and because of that, you have to be prepared for anything, even something as seemingly mundane as cooking. A hunter ideally should have prowess and intelligence in basic anything, and they are the forces that basically drive the world. I think it's said in Volume 1 that, like, 60% of all the richest people on the planet are hunters or something like that. Like, it's pretty ridiculous. And plus, when you have a hunter, you get total access to all, like, public, what's the term, public immunities, whatever it's called. You get access to that, like, utilities. You get entrance to like all countries, like basically for free, like no strings attached. So obviously being a hunter is like a big deal, and you can accomplish a lot. So it's different. It's not just like someone that is like hunting animals or something, right? It's much more complex than that, and that's kind of like true for this whole world, you know. While we don't really see that much in Volume Two, it still does a good job pushing the story forward. That's pretty much all I have to say about Volume 2. Yeah, slightly shorter. It's probably gonna continue that way for a bit. Not really until we get to the Phantom Troop arc, where I think things start to get very interesting. But anyways, signing off for today.